Hello everyone! Today we're doing something rather special. I got to sit down with none other than Steve Danuser, narrative director for World of Warcraft. We're getting closer to the release of Dragonflight, and while I would love for them to spoil the entire story before it's even told, I figured that it might be wiser to ask some other questions, like how do they view the way that the story is being told in the game, how do they look back at adding the jailer at the tail end of it, or where did the centaur come from? All of that and more in this video. Timestamps will be in the description. Of course, thank you so much to Steve for sitting down with me and everyone else that made this happen. With that, sit back, relax, and I hope you'll enjoy. Steve, thank you very much for giving me the time of day to actually do this interview. Hello there.
Oh, this is awesome. I'm very happy to talk to you.
It's been a long time coming, I think. Before I dive into the question, because I got 30 minutes and I could honestly talk to you with about lore for 5 hours. My understanding is that you are the lead narrative designer at World of Warcraft. Could you very quickly tell us what it's all about?
Yeah, actually, I'm the narrative director now of World of Warcraft, and yeah, so I oversee the high level story, our planning, our plot lines as they unfold. I work with a group of creatives to kind of flesh out what our expansion plans are, and kind of pitch storylines and the characters that'll be involved, and those kinds of things, and then take those ideas and talk about them with the team and energize them and get them excited about where our storylines are going and for all the content that they're going to build. Yeah, that's really the main areas I oversee. We have a narrative team that we've built up over the years, and they work closely with our quest designers and our content team and other people who are making the World of Warcraft content to ensure that story is woven through everything that we do. And it's really a joy to work in this great universe that so many people like yourself have cared so deeply about.
Very deeply, as you most likely also read on the internet. And now our adventures are going to go into the Dragonflight, into the Dragon Isles. Now, obviously, I would love to ask you questions and like reveal the story that is to come, but I think that would be unfair. Let the story unfold itself. So I would rather talk about the design philosophy and where we come from as we go into the new expansion. So first of all, my question is, I've had a few friends of mine come back into the story, and a lot of people on stream ask as well. They would love to experience the story of Warcraft within World of Warcraft itself. And over the years, that's become rather difficult, with patch content removed, the Cataclysm revamp. In Shadowlands, for example, with the Covenants now being unlocked, all the chapters are thrown at you in one go. How does the team view this problem of narrative storytelling, and are there any plans in the works to fix this, to make this better experience?
Well, you're right that there is a ton of content that has been added to World of Warcraft over the years. And, we do spend a lot of time thinking and talking about, the best ways to curate that and to make it accessible. And when we introduced Chromie Time, that was one of the ways that we tried to, let's present these expansions as kind of storylines that you can delve into and try to experience as what it feels like to level up through those and play your characters through those. And there was a lot of successes there and things we want to keep refining and want to think about. And there's times where we have taken content out of the game, but that's never our preference. We usually try to find a way to make it still persist. Obviously, back in the day of Cataclysm, I wasn't around, so I'm not sure all the decisions that went into that, but that was probably the biggest change to the existing world. And but these days, what we try to do is make that content accessible, and we would love to hear from the community about your ideas about how to better surface that, how to make it clearer where these pieces of content are. Another addition we made to the game was like our campaign interface, which didn't exist in the older expansions, but that's been a great way to help people at least have insight into kind of the thread that they're on and the campaign that they're playing through at a time. But we talk about ways to, better surface that. So it's an ongoing process, and we don't feel like we're there yet, but want to keep working at it. And we have a great UI team that really wants to help us present our content in the best way possible. So those are discussions we continue to have with them.
And I imagine feedback would be on the forums or on Twitter. But then one of the things people run into is, for example, in order to experience the storyline, an example would be Sylvanas' motivation when it comes to work with the jailer. They have to go to third parties, like books, or that the books themselves are being told from a perspective now. So it's not even actual clear information. It's rather an opinion or a character that tells the storyline. What is the design plan going forward in Dragonflight? Can we expect the story to be in books again, or what is the design behind that?
Well, again, I can't speak to the decisions that were made in the past, but the way that I look at it for when we have our novels is that we want to tell stories that best fit the medium that they are, that the strengths of the medium. So the game is about gameplay, and it's about playing a game, and certainly we have lots of cinematics and we have lots of dialogue and things like that, but we want our storyline to come through the action, through the world itself, through the places you go, the things you see happening, and that your character is able to engage with, and then punctuate those gameplay experiences with highly action moments that our cinematics can do really well, or emotional moments that, as you've seen, our amazing cinematics team keeps leveling up their skills at being able to convey those emotions. I think that books and print, whether it's comics or novels, I think those are really good at getting inside the mind of characters. And so when it comes to something like showing a perspective of someone, that's a strength of print media. As opposed to in the game, where it's much harder to see those insights unless they're kind of monologuing or kind of telling you very exposition heavy kind of, where you're just sitting and listening. And some people like that, but we like the game to be much more visceral in terms of you're playing through something. So
the game is more focused on the gameplay, whereas the books are to add to it. So if you take, for example, the Shadowlands as an example, like Sylvanas' motivation with the jailer, the whole Lirav connection, for example, is not portrayed in the game until after the fact. Like we got Lirav added to the Ghostlands, I believe, like after thing, but it's not exactly clearly explained in game. If we look at the balance that the Shadowlands had when it comes to storytelling, or for example, the Cataclysm where Cairn died in a book, how does that balance going forward work?
Yeah, well, I don't want to use the books to have major events happen within them that you won't see in game. So like your example of Karen dying in the book, or some of the stuff with the trial of Garrosh and how it transitioned into Warlords of Draenor. Like I would prefer that the books do more to kind of reveal extra information about things that are happening in the world. And so in that regard, like the Sylvanas novel was really great in that we got to see both history that we can't really portray in the game in any sort of, in that same depth and meaning. And we also got to see some of her insights as she was going through things in the Shadowlands. Now, I will say that we could have done a stronger job of showing some of those motivations in game, and we could have done more with that as well. And that's a lesson that we learn going forward in terms of our storytelling and how we get those important character moments across. So it's always a learning process for us. I don't think that we, hopefully we try not to repeat ourselves, and that we're always trying to improve our craft. And that was part of the process too, of thinking about Dragonflight and what kind of books we want associated with this expansion. And we didn't do a novel that we had set between the two expansions that had a lot of backstory or had a lot of things that you kind of needed to know going into the expansion. We are doing a short story that will be coming out in the near term, but cool. but that was more about giving a specific moment in time that is more flavorful, and it doesn't, whether you read it or not doesn't really impact your
Beautiful.
enjoyment of
And the short
what
story
you get to go into Dragonflight.
will be available on the WoW website as well, I'd imagine. The
Yep,
short story.
yep,
Beautiful.
absolutely, for free for everyone to read.
Always great to hear. About lessons learned for the Shadowlands, we saw a major impacts that are going to ripple on in the future of the storytelling. And when we're talking about Shadowlands, we have to talk about the Jailer. They've been retroactively added basically at the tail end of the story of Warcraft, as in the Jailer pretty much made the story of Warcraft happen up to the point of the Shadowlands, if I understood it right. Looking back at that decision and looking back at the reception of the Jailer and how that all played out, how does the team look at that?
Well, I wouldn't put it that certainly the Jailer and the influence of death is probably the larger influence that is seeded through Warcraft's history. And I think you can still play through that content or read those experiences and just take them for what they are. If you want, you can play Warcraft 3 still today. You can play through our Wrath of the Lich King expansion now in Classic, and you can take those stories as you want. But with Shadowlands, what we were trying to show was that death with a capital D is this kind of cosmic influence that has touched Azeroth in ways that were different, but yet similar to how forces like Order have touched Azeroth, or how the Void has touched Azeroth and affected its history. So what that really was about doing was showing that that death is a force that wants things, that all these cosmic forces are driven to become kind of the dominant force in the universe. And the Jailer and what he was trying to do by reaching Zereth Mortis and going into the Sepulchre, that was about him trying to make death the dominant force in the cosmos. And while we thwarted him there, the implications of that story do affect how we look at these cosmic powers and their role in the universe. And so I think in that regard, it gave us a lot of fuel for future storylines and hopefully make fans, give them some interesting things to think about and chew on.
Because there was mention in game, I believe in the new dungeon released today, with the books of the first ones, that there are more Xeros out there. So not just for the domain of death, but also all the other cosmic domains. But you mentioned that you can still experience the story of Warcraft and the Lich King and everything that's built upon without the touch of the Jailer. But at the end of the day, it was the Jailer and in combination with the Nephrius and the influence of the Dreadlords that caused all these events to happen pretty much since the dawn of Azeroth. If we take a look at all the events that happened that led into stopping the Jailer, one could argue like, okay, we had a storyline where a force like Kil'jaeden or the Burning Legion had threat and responsibility, but actually it was the Jailer, or the Titans did something, but actually it was the Jailer. Isn't that a major change retroactively to a storyline that was already established?
Well, the Jailer and his allies, because it wasn't just him, he was locked away in the maw, but he had allies who were helping him, and people like Denathrius had agents of their own. So it doesn't change the things that the Legion did. It doesn't change the things that Kil'jaeden put in motion. It just shows that there were other forces who were nudging some of those things along. But we didn't change any of the history of the events of Warcraft 3 or Wrath of the Lich King. Those things happened just as they play out in those games. We didn't touch any of that stuff. We just wove in some additional motivation and some machinations kind of behind the scenes. Okay. The books that you can now find in the Uldaman revamped dungeon add some additional texture and thought, but again, none of that is saying that the Jailer or the forces of death manipulated the Titans. That's still a separate storyline. It was really that there was some manipulation of the Legion and what they were trying to do in order to get the influence of death rooted in Azeroth. That was really what was going on there, because again, the Jailer needed that energy of Azeroth to be drawn into Zereth Mortis to do what he wanted to do, which was reshape the cosmos in his own image.
Okay. Speaking of Woven and Zereth Mortis and everything, especially the books as well that we're going to see, there's again the mention of the first ones. And if I understood the storyline with the first ones correctly, once upon a time we had the Titans that brought order to the universe, and the first ones are established as a mysterious force that brought order to the cosmic domains, if I understood it right. But it also meant that there was a woven fate, a true Mallwalker, gateways opening to us, prophesized. A lot of it seemed to be like there was already a path destined for us. Now with the defeat of the Jailer and Shadowlands come to a close, are we still walking the path predestined by the first ones, going into Dragonflight, or is that completely closed off now?
So it wasn't that the first ones laid out an exact path that mortals were walking. I think what the first ones did, because they are these beings that kind of sit above the cosmic forces that we've known so far, like the Titans and the Void Lords. The first ones predate them. Mm-hmm. And what they did was prepare for eventualities, is the way that I would put it. So if you think about how like the Titans represent belief in one path, one structure, and the void represents all things being possible, you could imagine that the first ones, who sit kind of above them on that cosmic scale, have elements of both of those things. So, and those are different perspectives, but yet there can be ways that those outlooks can work together. So the things with that the first ones kind of left behind for us in the Shadowlands, it was not that, they are going to follow this one path. It was that these are things that someday, if the flow of the universe plays out in ways that they could foresee, that these mortals who would become increasingly important for the fate of the cosmos, that they would have some of these tools available to them. So it wasn't predetermined, but they put some things out there into the universe that might be of use for us.
But the keepers in Zereth Mortis and those that we come across in the mall, they literally read our anima and they say, oh, the prophecies have fulfilled, the predestined Mallwalkers, as well as the locations are extremely precise. Like there's one in the mall that we needed, the one in Corvia that we needed, and one in Zereth Mortis. And Zereth Mortis is a domain where nobody was actually supposed to go. But it's specifically spot where we were predestined to go to that the keepers say, like, oh, Mallwalker of Fate, you've come here. Similar to how the Jailer was not just stabbing in the dark in order to get his plans going. He could predict at the end of Wrath of the Lich King that Sargeras was not going to destroy Azeroth. He was not going to miss Azeroth. He was going to precisely stab him in such a way that the blood of Azeroth was going to fulfill his plans. So while the idea of the first ones are predestined, it seems like the storyline supports a more accurate path as we know what's going to go.
Well, I think that, the thing you need to keep in mind is perspective and belief as well. So like the denizens that the attendants, for example, that we met in Oribos or in Corthia, or some of the enlightened brokers that we met in Zereth Mortis, these were people who believed in something. They were sort of, they had these things, whether you think of them as prophecies or doctrines that they believed in, they've been kind of waiting a very long time for some of these things to come to pass. And when somebody believes in a prophecy or a doctrine like that, they look for ways to make it true when someone shows up that does something that falls in line. We see that in the real world all the time, of like people want a pattern to be true, or they want a theory to be true. And when they see things that they can put into that pattern to make it seem true, it feels like a prophecy fulfilled. And so whether that's exactly true or whether it's just a point of view of these characters is something that you can think about and debate. But in no way has the fate of the mortals of Azeroth been pre-written, and they're just kind of walking through a script. The thing that separates mortals from magical beings is free will. That's something that's unique to the mortal soul. That's what makes it distinct. Even when you were in the Shadowlands, there was a difference between souls that had come over and the things that they did versus beings that were of magic, of death magic in that case. And so while magical beings are kind of driven by the influence that they are a part of to promote that influence, to propagate that influence, to try to make that influence the most dominant force in the cosmos. It's mortals who have the free will to decide what their destiny is, what their fate is, which way they're going to do, which powers they're going to embrace. That's why as players, we can embrace all these different sorts of powers and use them kind of at our will. It's because mortals have that choice, and that's unique among the beings who are rooted in magic.
I love that you say, like, free will is very important for character design. And you mentioned earlier, like, that they had this belief and that they made their own prophecies, like, kind of, they want it to happen. But at the same time, there's, like, proof is in the pudding. Like, they tell us, like, if you are the true Mallwalker, this gateway, as prophesied, will open up for you. And wouldn't you know it, it actually opens up for us. So it does seem like the game supports the idea of predestined. But that is a debate. Oh, I would love to talk to you for 5 hours. You have no idea. But we only have 30 minutes today. Going for the Dragonflight, real quick to the first ones. Could you tell us, like, will we see much more influence of them?
Of the first ones?
Yeah.
Dragonflight is really rooted back in terrestrial Azeroth and dealing with the stories of the dragons, their connection to the Titans. That's a big storyline. So no, this isn't an expansion that's rooted in the cosmic powers or the stories of the first ones. Really, it is really focused on the aspects, the kind of legacy that they have, that connection to the Titans.
Like Emerald Dream. Emerald Dream, Life Domain.
The Emerald Dream, all of that stuff. So we really wanted to root the story in this. Those cosmic themes are out there, and they'll certainly inform future plot lines and things like that. But Dragonflight is really about what's going on in Azeroth with the aspects.
Awesome. Like, honestly, I hope I don't come across as too rough or too cross, because it's all out of a passion for the world of Warcraft and a storyline that we all love.
I totally understand.
Very excited about Dragonflight as well. Like, so far what we've seen, going back to the grounded thing, not just the game mechanics, but also storyline build-up is great. I think we've got like a couple more minutes left, so I got a lightning round on questions that I'm very curious about. Azeroth has been said to be cleansed of the old gods. N'Zoth, Kafun, Yogg-Saron, Y'Shaarj, all gone. Is that true?
The influence of the void as embodied by the old gods has not gone away. While we've defeated some of the old gods themselves, we did beat them on the mortal plane after all, and they are not beings of the mortal plane. And if you can extrapolate some of the kind of cosmic rules of what that means, then that kind of gives you your own answer, or at least some things to think about.
I wanted to I wanted to follow it up, but I love it. I'm just gonna leave it at that. Okay, so we've seen the time skip in game, and just today on the PTR we got like the wedding of Lorthmar Philistra. Some time has passed on Azeroth, just to give it a chill moment. Now we've also seen at the Forsaken that they have unlocked the power to cleanse the Blight from Lordaeron. What about Gilneas? Will we ever see the return of Gilneas for the Worgen? Is that perhaps something in the works?
That is a storyline that we have not forgotten about.
Fair enough. Okay. The Centaur on the Dragon Isles. In the Collector's Edition, it clarifies that the Centaur that the ones we know are merely a copy of the ones that came before, the ones on the Dragon Isles. So where exactly did the ones on the Dragon Isles come from?
Well, I wouldn't call it a copy per se, but what I would say is that Centaur are a native race to Azeroth. They've been around for a long time, and so they date back to the time when there was the supercontinent of Kalimdor. And so the Maruk Centaur that we see in Dragon Isles, the Centaurs were very contentious, just like the ones that we know today. And the Maruk broke off because they were a bit more enlightened. They wanted to get away from the conflict, and that took them to the lands that would be the Dragon Isles. And really, the Centaur that had existed in the rest of Kalimdor just fought one another to extinction. And so you didn't see the Centaurs that were kind of more located in central Kalimdor died off, and it was just the Maruk that we know of that persisted. But that doesn't change the mythology that we know of the Centaurs, and the Kalimdor Centaurs of modern Warcraft. They were kind of reintroduced to the world through those magical means, and so the Centaurs we know today are kind of their own reintroduction, I guess you would say. But the roots of Centaurs date back to the early history of Azeroth itself.
Okay, so the original Centaur, they were always just there, because we were kind of wondering, like, so we have Fetidras and Zetar, son of Cenarius, they got together and they made the Centaur that we've always known. And now we got these original ones. So the whole idea of Cenarius together with Fedazane is not a thing. They were just native creatures of the land.
Well, again, like we're not changing that storyline at all, but that was a reintroduction of new tribes of centaurs to the world. The older ones, apart from the Maruk, as far as we know, had died off.
Okay, and they were just there, similar to like the Tauren, how they were always there.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, fair enough.
Yeah, the mortal races, they've evolved over time as well. From that kind of primordial age when mortals first started to emerge.
Okay. This one, I'm already ready for a shutdown. There's been some data mine stuff when it comes to the Green Dragon Ysera. In the Collector's Edition, we also see a beautiful symbol of Ysera and Raffion, but not her daughter Marifra. But Ysera has been bound in the Shadowlands to Ardenweald. What does that mean for her future in Dragonflight?
Well, that is a big storyline that plays out through the course of Dragonflight, and yeah, I don't think it's a secret at this point to say that Ysera is certainly involved in the storyline, but her role needs to change because she was awakened in Ardenweald through the Winter Queen's direct intervention, and that means that she didn't get reborn through the normal cycle of slumbering in Ardenweald. Then emerging into the dream. And if she had done that, then maybe she could have returned to Azeroth as she was. But now she is bound to that power. And so she is bound to both life and to death. And that's going to have implications on her storyline. And Marithra is very much a part of that story as well.
Beautiful. Yeah, if Elune wills it, she will soar through the skies again. Okay. Dragons and the Domain of Order are going to play their part in the storyline, as we've already seen from the whole Primalist section coming up. Could you hint at other primal forces that we might see play a part in the expansion? Some of the cosmic force, I should say. Sorry.
Again, we're not really delving into the cosmic forces as these kind of disembodied things. There's certainly Titan stuff that plays out in this expansion because the history of dragons and titans are so tied together. And in fact, when the expansion starts, Alexstrasza is looking for a way to re-empower the aspects because they've got this enemy that they need to face, and they were only able to defeat before when they were at their full strength, and they're much diminished now compared to what they once were. And her first instinct is to, well, Tyr isn't around anymore, so how could we re-empower ourselves? And in the Dragon Isles are these oath stones that were the symbol of the Titans' bond with the dragons. And she thinks that if they can set the flights right, that will re-empower these oath stones, and maybe that magic can restore the aspects. So that's guiding us through the level up experience of Dragonflight, and you'll see those oath stones through the course of the story. And whether that works or not, whether she has to try something else, that remains to be seen. But that relationship between the dragons and the Titans, both in their history and the implications of that, are very much part and parcel of this storyline.
Awesome. Yeah, it's one of the more interesting ones. The feedback I've seen so far, like it's reminiscent of the Kyrian storyline with the Forsworn, where you see that there's this story established, and yet there's more to it. Now, when it comes to the Kyrian and Forsworn, we saw that, for example, Devils was quickly taken off the stage, and we were quickly allying to just the Kyrian. It's their way, even though at the end of the fact, it was shown that the Forsworn actually had a valid point. Do you feel similar to the Dragonflight storyline as it's building up so far? For those worried that we might have a repeat of history, do you have anything to say to them?
In terms of repeating which part of history?
Just signing up with the Kyrians, like for example, just signing all the Titans, they're the good guys, and their other point of view is swept to the side, and we're just gonna wipe them out.
Yeah, well, I think that some of our best villains, both in Warcraft and in other media, start with having understandable motivations. And when you look at the Incarnates, the first one of which is Razageth that we see unleashed, and you think about what the Primalists were being driven by, they have a valid point. Their entire philosophy was just rooted in this idea that dragons should not be touched by outside influences. They should be free to be their own beings and not be changed by the magic of the Titans, for example. And that was a disagreement at first, and disagreements led to conflict, and conflict led to war. And what makes someone a villain is not necessarily the ideology they have all the time. Sometimes it can be the actions that they will take in service of that ideology. So with the Incarnates, even though they started in an understandable place, they've done some very nasty things throughout history. And we will learn more about that as the story unfolds. And we will see that they started out with, again, those relatable intentions, but ended up in a place that the aspects really had to fight against them for the sake of preserving not only their own kingdom, but Azeroth as a whole.
Beautiful. Like, honestly, the things that you're saying right now, it's making me more and more excited about the story of Dragonflight, honestly, with that mindset. I think we're just about out of time. My last question to you is, if you had to pick one thing to be most excited about for the story of Dragonflight, without spoilers, what would it be?
It honestly is just adventuring alongside the aspects and seeing them be awesome again. You know, after giving up their powers to defeat Deathwing, they had a downturn, and you know, they've been kind of adrift a bit in terms of, you know, what their future was, what they were doing, and this whole expansion is really about making these characters awesome again, and to soar alongside them. You know, like you saw in our cinematic, there's that feeling of being in their presence and seeing them do these awesome things and helping them, you know, find not only the greatness that they once had, but like, what is their future? That's just an awesome, fun story to tell. And I'm super excited. Our whole team really embraced that and was excited about all these characters. And I think that love and care will come through as you're playing through the expansion.
Beautiful. Well, thank you very much. Yeah, I hope everybody at home is as hyped as I am. And thank you very much for your time, for answering all of our questions.
Yeah, absolutely. It was a lot of fun. Let's talk again.
Yes, please. All right. Bye-bye.
All right. Bye.
And there you have it, the end of the interview. Again, thank you so very much to Steve and everybody else at Blizzard for making this happen, for sitting down with me and letting me do this interview. I had a blast. I think I mentioned it mid-interview. I could sit down with them for 6 hours and deep dive into the story that they're being told, that they're doing, feedback on and all that. All in all, my major takeaway from this is that they're telling me everything right. They're telling me that there's going to be an adventure in Dragonflight, that we're going to go back to basics, that instead of dealing with fractures and cosmic forces, like the cosmic forces will play their part, but they're not going to take front and center. That has me excited. And I mentioned this during the reactionary trailer for the pre-patch. When they drop a trailer or cinematic and my reaction to it is pretty much one-on-one with how they wanted to convey it, that means they got a mindset when it comes to the storytelling. Obviously, interviews, I'm hoping that the mindset is actually going to become a reality. I'm hoping that we're going to see that delivered within Dragonflight. I'm excited for the launch. I'm excited for the coming month. And beyond that, only time is going to tell. For now, thank you very much for watching, everyone. Subscribe if you like my videos. Leave a like if you enjoyed this one. And until next time, see ya!